Floating Ghost and Cherry Blossom. Huh. I wonder if there's a connection to... Oh! You know, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is... I gotta say, Yu-Gi-Oh! As a game has been very interesting lately. I'll tell you that much. I'll just say that much. It's been very interesting. Its community, the cards that have been coming out, I gotta say, a lot of them have been very interesting. I'll say that much. Some of them seemingly overpowered, but, you know, that's just initial knee-jerk reactions, I suppose, and we'll just have to see when we cross that bridge and we have access to the cards as well. Actually, I think the new cards from Shining Victories are on a Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro or Dev Pro now, so I think at this point in time, people may have already figured out whether or not that new True Draco Awakening is broken or not. Like, I feel like the card is very, like the card inherently is bad for, well, not bad as in like the card sucks or anything, but it's kind of a card that's like, it seems like it's a card specifically designed to make the Draco Pendulum mirror matches kind of like a thing you have to play. It makes them kind of matches where you have to be careful because otherwise you could get wrecked so hard. But I don't know. I guess this video isn't about that. I mean, that's probably a separate video. No, this video is about a deck that I've been meaning to get, that you guys have probably been, well, you guys, I don't know how many of you are still watching my videos at this point, but about a couple of you that still are here with me have been wanting to see this. And by gosh, by the heavens above, I will get this thing up. And I'm kind of in the right mindset to do this now because, heck, and to be completely honest, I had to make a lot of changes to this deck because I was initially going to do one and I didn't like how the deck was at the time. And then I just kind of stopped playing for a bit. Well, not stopped playing. I just stopped doing videos because I've been trying to handle some personal problems or personal issues. And then even when I'm back, I'm just like, okay, do I even want to do this right now? No, I need to still work on this and stuff like that. And even with this, I'm not exactly sure. Like, I know that this deck will always have the inherent weakness of just having big high level monsters that will be dead in your hand. I understand that. It's just that certain plays are not consistent enough in here. So I had to kind of like I basically have to like do some very weird stuff and some things that some things I even figured out because, oh, I can do this and that. And then we got something, hopefully. So for those who just want the deck list, I'll have it in the description and I'll make a note of it in the comment section below. Like I'll put a uploader comment in there kind of saying, oh, there's a deck list in the description if you just want that. And the side deck is not really a side deck except for this and this, I guess, but I'll kind of explain why I've thought about that. But the rest of these are either cards I just don't have room for in the extra deck, or maybe they're cards that I've tried out but just hadn't worked out nearly as well for me, even though you could go for them. Or maybe they're OCG only, but I really want to run them in here. Like they're OCG exclusive, and I really want to run them in here, but I can't because this is the TCG profile. Or they're cards I cut out of the deck for reasons unbeknownst to you guys, I suppose. Or cards I want to, and again, you know, cards that I want to try out, but I haven't tried them out, or I just don't know if I could make it work properly or on a consistent level or not. So, yeah, with that said, let's get to the profile. So, for the monsters, we have 2 copies of Talaya, Princess of Cherry Blossoms. We have Tytannial, Princess of Camellias. We have Gigaplant, 3 Lonefire Blossoms. Dandylion, Naturia Rosewhip, Glow Bulb, Copy Plant, Rose Paladin, Rose Lover, 2 Junk Forwards, Spell Striker, Marauding Captain, Mathematician, 2 Maxis, and 2 Effect Veilers. For the spell cards, we have 15. We have 3 Twin Twisters, 3 Super Solar Nutrients, 2 Miracle Fertilizers, 2 Instant Fusions, Reinforcement of the Army, Book of Moon, Foolish Burial, Raigeki, and Soul Charge. For the trap cards, we run 3 of them. We have Breakthrough Skill ×2 and Jar of Avarice. Still like this card. I do wish Pot of Avarice came back, but understandably, I know why it's banned in the TCG, because it's technically faster than this is. Plus, the new, because, Konami's got to sell product, and, Jar of Avarice is the new Jar card, the new Avarice card, so that's kind of a thing. For the extra deck, we have the Fusionist ×2. We have, for the Synchros, we have Armory Arm, HCS Sahimoth, Splendid Rose, and Trishula, Dragon of the Ice Barrier. For the Xyz, we have quite a number of them. We have 9, which is pretty much the bulk of this deck. 3 copies of Melee of the Trees. We have Mequipped Engineer, Leviair the Sea Dragon, Wind Up Zenmanes, number 47 Nightmare Shark, Hieratic Sun Dragon Overlord of Heliopolis, and Divine Dragon Knight Felgrand. On a side note of that, I'm looking forward to the new Felgrand Dragon structure deck that the OCG's getting, because years ago I had the Rise of the Dragon Lord structure deck from like a long time ago. I want to say it was 2007 or something like that. Like, I really liked that deck at the time. Like, I loved the deck concept, and I remember getting Light and Darkness Dragon for Christmas one time from a friend, and it was so good in that deck because the whole theme was just reviving dragons from the graveyard. And I thought it was a neat concept at the time. And the whole deck that was built around it and some new cards that were mediocre but had a focus on that was kind of interesting. And I can't wait to see what they do with the new stuff. I'm looking forward to it. Like that new dragon reviving spell card, and the new level 4 Knight, and the new Felgrand effect monster, which some people probably don't even know what the original did, but that's just me. Anyways, now that we got the main and extra deck pinpointed down, let's talk about the cards in the deck, the things I took out and stuff like that, and stuff like that. So 2 copies of Talaya. This is like the cornerstone of this deck. She's the reason that I pretty much played this deck to begin with. Well, not that I played the deck to begin with, but the reason that I was interested in making this kind of deck work since like Judgment of the Light back a few years ago. But yeah, I've been playing her in the deck ever since. Been using 2 ever since. I've never changed that, and I don't see myself changing it because it's freaking Talaya plants. After all, Talaya's kind of the, like, I know it's, I mean, technically the deck is Plant Princess, but I'm calling it Talaya Plants because when I put this deck together, people weren't really playing this, and I was interested in making a deck around having 2 copies of Talaya on board and having the Talaya lock. And yes, I still call it the Talaya lock because that's what I call it, and because I'm awesome. Not really, but I could try. I could try to be cool, but obviously that's not really the case, is it? Well, that's just how it goes. Tytannial. I mean, this pretty much same deal as just kind of adding more protection this time against targeting, but it also deals with targeting on the opposing side of the field. So, we all know about PePe or Performages Pals, and, BOSH is getting Performa Pal Pendulum Sorcerer in BOSH as an import. So, with that in mind, you can kind of stop this too, because she doesn't care where what cards are being targeted. It can even be the other side of the field. You could still stop it by attributing another plant monster. So it's a pretty neat feature, and I'm glad that that's still there, because it just means that you do have a built-in out to that. Although, because the card's on the field, your opponent's gonna have to play around it, basically. So, I mean, it's not impossible, obviously, but if they ever want to do any kind of targeting, well, they gotta watch out. Gigaplant. I actually had this guy out of the main deck for a bit, just because I had like, the 2 Talaya, 1 Tytannial, 1 Cheetah Beam, and 1 Gigaplant. that was kind of like the boss monster ratio I've had for so long. And I was thinking, all right, well, I'll just take out the Gigaplant and just leave the Cheetah Beam in, just so I had the 4, and I like I have the same amount, but I at least have a floater on my side of the field that can give me another monster when sent to the graveyard. Now, I'll explain why I don't have Chirubeme in here right now, even though I want to put her back in. But for the time being, Gigaplant seems to be just really, it's interesting because usually decks don't run Gigaplant unless they're running, what's it called? Supervise. And I've been the oddball who runs Gigaplant in this kind of deck without that. I mostly did that because if you do get the effect off, I mean, he kind of works like Red Eye's Darkness Metal Dragon, in that you can constantly keep bringing back monsters from the grave from your hand or graveyard every turn. This is a bit awkward at times, but because of cards like Rose Lover and Soul Charge and stuff like that, you could kind of mitigate this a bit. But, you know, I'm only running one because it could be a brick in your hand, but less of a brick because you could tribute summon it if you really, really have to. So that's kind of my reasoning for that. And just having a constant stream of monsters on your side of the field, especially when Talaya protects him from being destroyed by card effects, it's pretty nice. And Tytannial can protect him from being targeted too. So if you can protect this guy, I mean, it's pretty much a constant stream of monsters each turn. Granted, this deck isn't like super meta or anything like that, but it's a really fun deck. And heck, I'd argue that this is probably my favorite Yu-Gi-Oh deck of all time. Just because of the amount of time I spent with this deck, the amount of adapting I've done with this deck, and just the way the deck evolved from using cards like Violet Witch and so on to, you know, having new support, give it a little bit of speed to update it a little bit to the current game state, even though pendulums are clearly better. Or they're just clearly more powerful and they're more adjusted to the power creep of the game. So as opposed to this deck, which has a monster that isn't exactly adjusted to power creep, but I'll explain that in a moment. But yeah, that's why he's here. 3 Lonefire, I mean, don't gotta explain that one. And Dandylion, same with this one. Rosewhip, I kind of don't need to, but at the same time, I probably should explain just briefly. Mostly, she is a level 3 Earth Plant Tuner monster. And, you know, her effect on the field's decent too. Against certain decks where they have to use multiple spells at once, they can only activate one per turn, which is very good against some matches because they have to play spells from their hand one at a time. If you're playing against like pendulum decks, they can only activate one pendulum monster card in the spell card zone or in the pendulum zone once at a time. So unless they destroy this, they have to kind of slow roll their way into their combos or something like that. Or they have to go for different plays that they wouldn't otherwise have to make. Of course, that's kind of why that's another reason why she's here. But, I mean, this is mostly just to be a tuner monster and a level 3 Earth for Melee of the Trees. So, that's just kind of my reasoning about it. I mean, you know, people could disagree, and I don't hate people for disagreeing. You know, because, you know, we want to have good discussions, you know. That's what we do. That's what I'm all for that. No, I don't want to be like, oh, I'm gonna just attack you because you have a different opinion, or I don't like this choice you made. So I'm just gonna yell at you and all that stuff. No, I'm not gonna do that. Anyways, yeah, I'm kind of getting off topic. Wow. You could tell I haven't done this in a while because, yeah, alright, let's move on. Glow Up Bulb. Glow Up Bulb, interestingly enough, I use it mostly with the interactions with Super Soul and Nutrient, but you can use it with cards like Mathematician or Foolish Burial to just bring it back from the graveyard, and you can make a level 4 Synchro like Armorion, which is obviously very good because you can just put it on your Talaya, your Tytannial, or Gigaplant and just make them massive and give them insane burn damage too. So that's kind of my thoughts behind that, but yeah, interestingly, I use it mostly just as a level 1 plant monster for Super Soul Nutrient. This card is kind of like, it's kind of an MVP, even though 3 might be too much. I'll kind of explain why I am, even though you only need to see at least one of this. Although you could kind of use multiples if you really need to, but I don't think I need to do that. Coffee Plant. This is a card I haven't used in here before, and it's kind of interesting. he copies the level of a plant monster on the field to himself. So he pretty much can copy Talaya's level to make himself a level 8. He could copy Gigaplant to make himself a level 6, which doesn't have any use in this deck at the moment because I'm not running any rank 6 Xyz. Even though I've considered that at one point, I just don't think it's going to come off nearly as often that I would do that. But it's there if you want to do that. So it's just something I want to point out as well. If you want to have that option, you could totally do that. Like maybe Constellar Ptolemy M7 or whatever. So you can do that if you want to. But I usually use them for like synchro and Xyz plays just because since you could copy a plant monster's level, like say Lonefire, Dandylion, and so on, you can make rank 3s, but you can also go for level 6 synchros, which I'm only using 2, but it's mostly because I usually I don't synchro summon nearly as often, but I do want to have them there because they give you extra options where maybe your Xyz can't do anything, but your synchros can. Like your synchros have extra utility that your Xyz don't even have, which again, I'll kind of get into that later. So that's kind of why I have him there. I mean, he might come out later on, but for the time being, he works out okay. He kind of allows you to go for Xyz plays, like say your rank 8s without using up 2 copies of Talaya or Talaya and Tytannial. Like if you just happen to have 1, but you have copy plant, you could go for Felgrand, which provides blanket protection for himself because, he can protect himself, but he can also negate a key monster's effect that's on the field. So you can stop certain monster effects that they would try to use or protect himself from card effects. So it's pretty flexible in that way. So it just kind of means you don't have to use 2 plant princesses to make your rank 8s, which will come in handy in the future, I'm sure, when we get like number 38, Titanic Galaxy or whatever his name is. Rose Paladin. Now, I was using 2 in this deck, but I cut her down to 1. And yes, I looked and I actually checked. It is a girl, so don't be like, hey, you got it wrong. It's a dude. I thought that too, but I was wrong. So yay for being wrong. Anyways, the first effect is, well, it's interesting because it's not as good right now. Well, not in every matchup at least. I mean, when you have pendulum monsters being as rampant as they are right now, it's kind of like, well, shoot, I can't use the effect because they don't go to the graveyard. They go to the extra deck, face up. So, well, dang, this effect's kind of useless. And the second effect, while useful, and I have used it in a few instances, isn't as that flexible. I mean, I would usually use this to get Lonefire out of the deck. Like if I use something like Junk Forward and Rose Poundin', destroy a monster and then get Lonefire, I could go for the play with like Lonefire and the Dandylion and the Melee and so on. Here, it's kind of less often that you're going to do that just because if you're playing against like a pendulum deck, then, well, sorry to break it to you, you can't use the first effect. So it's kind of dead in that way. So, but her second effect is still decent, and I use it quite a bit at times where you can discard her to the grave and then add a level 7 or higher plant monster from your deck to your hand. I usually like using Rose Lover to special summon that monster from my hand. Like say I go Foolish Burial, dump Rose Lover, then I go Rose Paladin to search Talaya or Tytannial. I can special summon one I searched to the field, and then I can go for like Lonefire, get out the second copy of Talaya, or if I had Tytannial, I could get out the Talaya instead, so I have the 2 level 8 plant monsters that could put in a lot of damage. But if you really want to, you can go for a rank 8. So it is a thing that you can do, but I mean, I don't think it would come up nearly as often. And again, you do want to have some like copy plant because it is an option. So that's kind of why it's still here and not completely removed from the deck. Because I mean, the first effect against some other non-pendulum decks is obviously useful because you could get the effect off there. And it makes certain floaters, well, not mistiming, but it makes certain monsters that are summoned from the deck mistiming. Like if you kill a Mermail Abyssland and you have player priority on your effect, so you go activate the effect, and if the opponent wants to use Lynn's effect, as Chainlink 2, if they summon Pike, they can't discard because he misses timing. So that's a little neat feature, but it doesn't come up that often. Rose Lover. Now, I considered running 2, but at the same time, 2 seemed a bit weird. Mostly because, like, the reason I even considered 2 in the first place was because if I happen to draw a Rose Lover, I want to at least have one in my deck to, you know, further some plays as, you know, as I go along. But here, it's kind of mitigated a little bit. Yeah, there are times where drawing her isn't great, but it's not as bad as it used to be. In fact, because of the introduction of Twin Twisters, you now have a discard outlet, but also a way to just blow up back row. So it's kind of a way to get her out of your hand into the graveyard while allowing you to summon stuff like Gigaplant, Tytannial, or Talaya, or even just something like Lonefire or Dandylion, whatever you need to summon from your hand. And because they're unaffected by your opponent's traps, it means that if you summon something like Talaya, protecting her from traps is amazing because she can't protect herself from being destroyed by trap cards like Bottomless or Torrential unless there are 2 copies on the field. But if you protect her, then any other plant monsters you summon for the rest of that turn are basically safe from being destroyed by card effects, which is a really cool feature. So it's definitely why I like that. But you can also kind of get her back into circulation with cards like Libya the Sea Dragon, which I'll get into a bit later. There's a lot of that in this video, but, you know, it's been a while, so I may as well get the most out of this because things happen, I guess, and I don't know how often my videos are going to be coming out, but, you know, I need to at least get this out because BOSH is almost here, and I may as well have one prepared and stuff like that, so in case something happens, I at least have this up. The 2 junk boards. You know, just kind of facilitates the melee of the trees place, which is practically the first thing you want to do most of the time. Unless you were like me and you tried Naturia Beast with Mystic Macro Copper Seed, and in which case you would go for that, but obviously it's not in the extra deck or in the main deck, so I guess that didn't work out nearly as well as I thought it would. Even though it is easy to make, it's just that without actual back row, he's not exactly that useful, unless your opponent just has spells and that's it, but that's not usually what happens. Usually there's at least one out to it. And if you don't have like a solemn card or anything like that, it's kind of like, or if you don't draw into a solemn card or something like a bottomless or a torrential, well, torrential would be counterproductive to this. If you don't have like bottomless or time space trap or something like that, then you're just kind of screwed. So that's kind of why I'm not doing that with this, even though I would do junk forward and macro carpacy to lower his level and then make Naturia Beast, but that's neither here nor there. Spell Striker kind of does a similar thing, except you banish a spell to do this. I don't know, like I hate drawing this card when I have no spells, and that tends to happen a lot more than you think it does, at least. Because that's Yu-Gi-Oh! In a nutshell, ladies and gentlemen. You're going to draw that one of in your deck that's like, oh, I need a spell to special summon from hand, even though you could just normal summon him. You obviously want to special summon him because that's kind of the reason you ran him in the first place. If you're playing a deck like this, that's kind of why you do that. Junk forward doesn't require a spell, but you need to have no monsters. You can have monsters out, but you need a spell to special summon him from your hand that way. So, and the attacking directly doesn't come up too much, but you know, you might have times where you can attack directly for game, and it's kind of funny because it's like, oh, god damn it, I have this massive board. You have like my opponent's got like this massive board, and it's like, oh, attack directly. That's it. GG. It's kind of funny. Marauding Captain kind of serves a similar purpose as these two do. Kind of facilitates quick rank 3 or even synchro plays if you have something like the Rosewhip. So that's kind of my thought there. Veiler Maxi, I mean, Veiler is going to be particularly important for certain matchups, obviously, because, you know, stopping something like Pendulum Sorcerer, Skullcrobat Joker, or just certain normal summons that would just gain them a lot of advantage. It's just nice to stop them because if you allow them to get that one search, you could be in some deep shit. Because you're not, and especially if you go second or something like that, you need to have something like Veiler where, you know, in the case of this deck, I might not be able to get out Tytannial fast enough. Because if I'm going second, well, there's no way I can summon Tytannial from my hand on my opponent's turn. So what do? You have Effect Veiler instead. And Maxi obviously draws you extra cards, so you gotta draw in the combo pieces. Or if they try to overextend, you may draw on the cards like Twin Twisters to where you could just blow up whatever back row they may have. Or you could draw on something like Raigeki to potentially punish your opponent. So, things like that. So these two practically work well with each other, and they're just good hand traps in general. They've always been good, just, depending on the format, they may not be as effective. So that's just my stance on that. Twin Twisters. Twin Twisters is like, wow. This is a card that I never even knew that I would have wanted in the game. Now, it's kind of weird because I understand where people would be coming from, that the card might not be so healthy because it's just kind of like, back row decks kind of get wrecked by this if they don't have like Starlight Road or that one trap card that I have. It's like the huge revolution is over. Actually, yeah, it is because, I think that's what, I have the card here. Jeez. But yeah, the huge revolution is over. Basically, they both kind of serve a similar function, and they both can stop Twin Twister. So that card might start seeing more play again. Those cards might start seeing play again, but for the time being, this card is very good. Now, 3 might be a bit much because there are going to be times where you draw multiples, and it's kind of like, well, damn, I drew 2 of them, and I only needed 1 at a time. But the reason I'm using 3 is because it serves as a discard outlet, and you kind of want to just see it you want to see it very early because some matchups are just going to be like, oh, search all my counter traps. And if I don't have something to blow up their back row, then I could be in deep shit. Like a fish without water, Like I'll basically be a fish out of water. Or a mermaid out of water. Please don't hate me. I'll do a profile of the deck soon, I promise. But yeah, anyways, back to topic. So yeah, Twin Twister, great card, and I welcome it to the game. Super Soul Nutrient. This card, man, this card has been integrated so well in this deck that I almost kind of felt like I needed to run 3. I was using 2, but I bumped it up to 3, even though you only need 1. It's weird. It's kind of like, it's one of those cards that you only need to resolve 1 or maybe even 1 of it, but you want to see it as early as possible. So let's say you have something like Mathematician or Foolish Burial to dump Glow Bulb into the graveyard. And you have something like, say, Junk Forward or Spell Striker, or even like Marauding Captain. I don't know, just stuff like that. In fact, let's use Mathematician because this is like one of my favorite plays that I like to do. You would go Mathematician, dump Glow Bulb, or you would dump Glow Bulb. Then you activate his effect to mill the top card of your deck, bring him back, then use Super Soul Nutrient to tribute him off to special summon Lonefire, because it does say apply a monster from your hand or deck whose level is less than or equal to the attributed monster's level plus 3. So, yes, he fits the requirement because he happens to be level 3. So, it just fits that requirement rather well. So, level 4 or lower. So, you would tribute him for Dandylion, and then you overlay for Melee of the Trees. Then, you would detach the Dandylion, bring back the Lonefire, get the 2 fluff tokens, then you would go tribute a fluff token for the second Lonefire Blossom. And yes, you could do this before anybody asks me, oh my god, how can you resolve it multiple times? Once per turn per copy that's face up. So each separate copy can activate the effect once per turn. That's why Lonefire in the Lonefire was such a big thing back then, because you could just thin your deck out like that. Anyways, then you use the second Lonefire to tribute the second fluff token to get the third one from your deck. So you get out your 3 Lonefires, then you tribute the third one for Tytannial, Gigaplant, or Talaya, and then you overlay the 2 Lonefires that you used up for Mech-Equipped Engineer. So you have Engineer, Melee of the Trees, and Tytannial. Or if you were running Chirubimi like I used to, you would have Chirubimi in defense instead. So you have Chirubimi protected from attacks, and you have Mech-Equipped Engineer to protect her from being destroyed by battle or card effects. So you have double layers of protection. But this isn't as good right now, obviously, so that's why I took her out, because that's not as good anymore. So, or at least at this point in time. I mean, maybe that'll change soon. So yeah, it's kind of one of the things that this enables you to do. It's kind of just another way to get you in the Lonefire, which you kind of want to see, and because you can't search out Lonefire quickly enough without, using cards like Violet Witch, which is kind of slow, and I used to use that card all the time, if you guys remember. And like some of my older profiles, I used to use Violet Witch because it was kind of another way to get to my one Lonefire at the time. So, the deck has evolved since, so I don't need it anymore. At least now I don't. Miracle Fertilizer. Again, I don't think I need to explain this one, except maybe why am I not running 3s, because you want it in the late game mostly, a lot of the time, but you want to have your Lonefires and stuff in the circulation first, because otherwise it's kind of like, well, this card's dead and it's not as good in the opening hand, and you can't use your normal summoner set the turn you do that, so you mostly want this in like the late game if you even get there, because Yu-Gi-Oh doesn't seem to let you get into the late game a lot of the time. But if you do get to the late game, this is really good because you have your plant presences, you have copy plants, you have just like Gigaplants, Lonefires, you just have stuff to bring back later on. And it's just really nice to have that option. So yeah, that's why I'm running 2. I don't want to overdraw this, but you do want to see it at some point. But 2 seems to be the right number. Same with Instant Fusion, because you don't want to draw like too many of these, because it's like you can only activate 1 a turn. So if you have nothing but instant fusions, then you're just kind of like, well, shit, this kind of sucks because I don't have any other monsters. So that's why I'm using 2. You want to see it, but at the same time, you want to have other monsters to work with it, like Spell Striker and so on. Rhoda, since the ban list I didn't cover because at the time I was not there to do that. And honestly, things happened and I didn't record that. I didn't record me doing a live reaction or anything, but the card being at 1 does mean that I can't, and also that's another reason why Rose Pounding is at 1, because I don't know, it's kind of weird because one of the things I would do is I would search it out when I had something like junk for it, so I could go for that play regardless if I just destroy an opponent's monster and send it to the graveyard. But because you can't do that anymore, it's kind of like you can't do it as often anymore, and because it's at 1, it's just kind of like, well, yeah, it's not as consistent anymore. And that's another reason why I'm not running more than 1 Spell Striker, because if I had more Rhodas, I would run 2 Spell Striker, because you had more of a chance to see one of your Rhodas as opposed to one of your Spell Strikers, because you run more of this, or you used to be able to run more than this. So that's my thought on that. Book of Moon, because it's Book of Moon. Foolish, because just dumps whatever you want. Raigeki, because Raigeki Soul Charge, because Lonefire and Soul Charge is amazing. Still is. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Although, power creep does dictate that the play may not be as good against certain decks in the format right now, because they just don't give a fuck what you put on the field. And breakthrough skills, and as a little bonus, it doesn't come up that much, but you can discard it with Twin Twister, so at worst, you could discard it with Twin Twisters, so that is a thing you can do, but you can't use the effect during the same turn that you send it to the graveyard when it's being discarded on your turn. But if you discard it on your opponent's turn, it's just like, oh, there's a breakthrough skill ready to be activated on, my opponent's Cyber Dragon Infinity or Pleiades or whatever. So it's just a way to have a safety net while serving as another discard card, a card that could be discarded. Jar of Avarice, because Jar of Avarice is really good, and I still like it in here, even though Pot of Avarice is awesomer. But, putting back your spells and traps is nice too. Well, most of your spells like Raigeki, Twin Twister, Rhoda, Instant Fusion, and your Fusionists, so you can reuse them again. So, it's just really nice. It's a bit more flexible, but Pot of Avarice is faster, and that's why I would use that instead for the time being. Because it doesn't come up nearly as often that I would put back my spells, but, it is there, so if you want to do that, you can totally do that. As far as these, there's not much to explain with a lot of these, like how I make them, but yeah, Army Arm, it's pretty simple. Like, Splendid Rose I could probably explain, but this is pretty self-explanatory, even though I was running this and Red Wyvern. And this is interesting because this and Psyhemoth have a similar purpose, actually, in getting rid of problematic monster threats. Now, they both have their ups and downs, obviously, and I kind of want to run them both just because they have distinctive advantages and disadvantages over each other. So I guess I could kind of go into that real quick. So with Psyhemoth, he's basically a big version of DD Warrior Lady. You banish this guy and also banish the monster he battles. That's amazing. Against some matchups, it's like getting rid of non-targetable cards or things you just can't destroy. I mean, that's really good. Because this guy, well, he can't destroy certain monsters. Or if they blow up, they have an effect that activates. So that's basically a downside there for him. But Shyhemoth has to battle. So he falls to like Mirror Force, Dimensional Prison, and so on. Any kind of battle stopper. Red Wyvern does not get stopped by such cards. You can, even if they use a card like Bottomless, if there's a monster with higher tag, you could still use the activate the effect and still blow up the monster. So you're not completely dead in the water if they have a card in response to your successful synchro summon. However, you can only use that effect once. So if your opponent stops it, you're pretty much stuck with a 2400 vanilla synchro monster on the field. So that's kind of an issue in itself. And there are things he can't destroy or that float when destroyed, so he's not as effective in removing certain threats as, say, Shyhemoth. But Shyhemoth falls to battle traps. And he banishes himself. So, unlike him, where he could destroy something and he could still attack, he cannot. He attacks something, he banishes, and that's it. Sayonara. But, you know, I don't have room for both because the extra deck is tight, man. It's so tight. That's why I don't have Black Rose or Queen of Thorns. I actually have her in the side deck, but again, that's for later, I think. And like, this video is long, but like you guys knew it was going to be long just because these always are, because I go more in depth in my videos than say a lot of others are. But maybe I am a bit too in depth with that and too much rambling too. So Splendid Rose. Splendid Rose is interesting because Splendid Rose I mostly use is kind of a way to push for a lot of damage and maybe even push for game. Mainly because of her ability to shrink an opponent's monster by half until the end of the turn. And obviously, if she attacks in the battle phase, you can banish another plant and have her own attack so she can attack again. So if you're attacking your opponent, but you just fall short, you could just go, oh, Splendid Rose, banish a plant from my graveyard, attack, game. So it's kind of another way to allow you to attack for game. Plus, when you have cards like Leviair the Sea Dragon that allows you to get back banished plant type monsters like, say, Lonefire Blossom, that's not bad. Because you can banish a plant like Lonefire, then you can use a card like Leviair to get back the Lonefire that you banished, and then use the Lonefire to summon another monster like, say, Tytannial or Talaya or Gigaplant. So you can push for a lot of damage while fueling your banish zone for a card like Leviair the Sea Dragon. So that's pretty cool. And also, she's a plant monster too. So she can be brought back with Gigaplant, Soul Charge. Well, Soul Charge can bring back any monster, but that's beside the point. A Miracle Fertilizer. So you have a way to get the card back outside once after she gets destroyed and sent to the grave. So you can kind of utilize her multiple times within the same game. So that's kind of a little neat feature. Of course, the downside is, like Shyhemoth, she has to battle stuff. But, you know, that's just how it goes, man. I mean, the payoff is very good, especially because, you know, if you use it in combination with something that has an armory arm equipped, you could basically do a lot of battle damage. And then since you're dealing with the destroyed monster's attack in the grave, so basically their original attack, you could do like a lot more damage than you normally would. So it's just kind of a way to push for more damage. Of course, this deck kind of lives and breathes by doing that kind of stuff, so you could get completely screwed. But that's just what happens. I mean, that's just how this deck is. Although some decks are very similar to this, but they don't give a shit if they get destroyed because they're either pendulums or they were like Dragon Rulers were back then, where they just have constant resources. And here, you can get screwed over big time. Trishula. I don't think I need to explain this one. It's actually relatively simple to make in here. And the fact that the deck can actually go for that, even as early as turn 1 if you have the right setup, I mean, why not go for it? Yeah, it costs you some defense at some points, but against some matchups, having a Trishula to cripple your opponent's hand, grave, and field is just really nice. It just means that you can out certain things that you probably couldn't before without having to attack, which is really cool. This card, I don't think I need to explain this. It's kind of like the heart and soul of the extra deck. The Xyz that you go into the most. Mechwood Engineer kind of protects this card mostly. He's there to mostly protect your key monsters on your field, like this or Gigaplant, so they're not dead. And then on your next turn, you could do whatever. So it's kind of a way to protect your setup, or at least key monsters you may have on your side of the field. I already explained the Levier's utility in the deck, and because you can also bring back stuff like Rose Lover. So, like, if you banish your Rose Lover to someone like Lonefire, let's say you did Mathematician and dump Rose Lover, banish for Lonefire, as part of that big play with like Melee of the Trees, you could use the 2 Lonefires you used up in the combo to go in the Levier, use Levier's effect to bring back the Rose Lover, then use the 3rd Lonefire that you didn't use to tribute off that Rose Lover. So, yeah, she's back in your grave for a future turn. So that also means you don't have to run a second copy. So if you just happen to use her early on, you can get her back with Levier. So I thought it's kind of cool that you could kind of use it as that kind of resource. And again, you can use it with cards like Splendid Rose, or heck, if you banish an opponent's monster off of this, you can get it back later on with Levier as well if you really want to. So he kind of serves a really awesome utility. Zen mains, because this is just a way to out problem cards that are on the field, and which is going to come up quite a bit, especially if you don't have something like Twin Twisters. Nightmare Shark. Now, I believe this is a new addition here, because I don't think I actually used this guy in my extra deck in this deck before. But this card is interesting. He kind of works like Heartland Draco for rank 4 decks, in that you can just get a cheap attack in directly for game. But what's interesting, is something I actually didn't think about until I started recording this, is that since it targets a water monster on your side of the field, you could target this. You could target your Talaya and attack for at least 2,900 damage, which is definitely more than 2k. In fact, that's relevant because if you fall short of 200 and they can out this guy, well, that's it. He's kind of dead. But if it's like, oh, they have less than 3k life points, even if they have like 2,900, you just go, oh, Talaya, attack directly, that's game. Unless you're playing against Performages Pals / PePe, where they have damage jugglers, so you can't exactly do that. So just keep that in mind. But it's a really neat trick that you can do, and it's definitely one that I could definitely recommend you doing at some point, because it's just a really nice way to close a game out, whether with himself or with Talaya. And I guess Trishula, if you just happen to want to do that too for some reason, which I don't see that happening too much, but it is an option. And these two, I don't think I need to explain too much. They're just really good rank 8s. Now, as far as this stuff, again, this is either stuff that I don't have room for in my extra deck, or maybe they're OCG only. I'll do more in-depth discussions about cards like Angel Trumpeter and Left Arm Offering, and why I even considered this in the first place, even though it's probably the riskiest tech card I would ever use in a deck ever. And, you know, cards like Ultimate Providence, I want to try to fit this in here, but I don't have room. And Dragon's Bond, I want to try running in this. Again, I don't have room, and since I'm not using Levier, well, I'm not using a Leviathan Dragon, I'm obviously not using this. So if you are running Leviathan Dragon, this is an interesting card you could try to run, because it's very easy to make Levier in this deck. So if you do draw Dragon's Bind and you can make a rank 3 like this, I mean, why not? It's very easy, and it's like a Vanity's Emptiness. And Solemn Strike, I mean, it's freaking Solemn Strike. What do I say about it? If I wasn't running stuff like Breakthrough Skill, Copy Plan, and so on, I would take those out for 3 copies of Solemn Strike, because the card is so good. But, you know, that's just me, though. I mean, people could say the card's overrated if they want to, but it is how it is. And, you know, stuff like Debris Dragon and Black Rose, I mean, I want to try to put them in here, but again, I don't have room. Like, I'm sorry, but the extra deck is tight, and I know some people will be like, well, are you going to be one of those people that ask for a larger extra deck? Well, at the current moment in time, no, actually, because I don't think that's a good idea right now. Heck, I think 15 is fine, because what it does is it forces me to make a choice as far as what to take out and what to keep. Heck, I took out Naturia Barkion because, well, I wanted to put in Nightmare Shark, But I'm like, I don't have room, so I gotta take something out. And the thing I used the least in here was Barkion, because Barkion didn't come up as often as I would thought, even though he's pretty easy to make in here. It's just that right now, like the traps that are being used, they're like Solemn Strike, Warning, etc. that could just negate your summons. So it's kind of like, whoa, why don't I just use something else, you know, and put in Barkion in the extra deck later on as the game progresses, I suppose. But yeah, it's kind of why, and same almost applies to this. Like, I did try Naturia Beast and Macro Kappa, but again, the problem I have with this is that if I'm not running like Solemn Strike, which I probably should if I'm doing this, if you don't draw and you're like your counter traps like Solemn Strike, Warning, etc., this isn't as effective because it's pretty easy to run over Naturia Beasts with just a few level 4s or level 3s and make rank 3s like Zen Mains or Leviathan Dragon to just run it over. But if they have like a back row card that protects him, then oh man, are you in trouble. In fact, this deck kind of loses that. If that's a thing, then yeah, this deck can kind of get in, this could have some serious trouble with it too. But you know, that's another discussion for another day, because I'm suddenly hearing things about, oh, Naturia Beast, should it get banned in the TCG? And I may go into that some other time. But yeah, I'm going in for 45 minutes, guys. Holy crap. And I think that's it. Oh, right. These two. Chudavime. The reason I'm not running here is because, well, this effect seems too easy to play around right now. And that play where I would have Melee of the Trees, Mech with Engineer, and Chudavime, it's not as effective right now because Ignister, Castel, and stuff like that. Well, mostly Ignister, because Ignister just doesn't care about any of this stuff. So it's like non-targeting, so I can't preemptively protect any of my guys because it's like, oh, they could just spin it back into the deck and I'm still screwed anyways. And he has more attack points, so if I'm not careful, something like this could summon a monster like this, and then it could get spun unless I play this, but Ignister or Prominence has more attack, so it's kind of like, well, you're kind of screwed out of the way. For now, I'm just taking this out, but this will go back in at some point. And Marina, now you might think, well, why the heck are you even thinking about side decking this? Well, the way I look at it is like this. When you're going for that, remember that play I keep talking about with Lonefire and Dandylion and Melee of the Trees and stuff? How you go Malaya, Lonefire, Dandylion, Fluff Tokens, all that crap? One of the neat things you can do is you can summon Marina instead of Talaya, because Marina's effect is that if exactly one planet type monster you control and no other cards is destroyed by battle or by card effect instead of the graveyard, you can target one card your opponent controls and destroy that target. This card must be faceable on the field to activate and resolve, blah, 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 blah. What I'm thinking, this is a bit ethereal, I suppose. My thought process is that when you go for the whole Lonefire thingy, so because the first Lonefire will be in defense because of Melee of the Trees, but the two Lonefires that you would summon with the other Lonefires can be in attack mode. So what you could do is you could go Lonefire into Lonefire now you summon the second Lonefire into attack mode and use the second one to summon the third copy in attack mode by tributing the other fluff token. Then use the third one to tribute the Lonefire that's in defense position to summon Marina. So you could, in theory, blow up at least 3 cards. Because if you ram into an opponent's stronger monster, say with the 2 Lonefires and Melee of the Trees, you could blow up 3 cards with Marina's effect. And then you can attack with Marina and take out the monster that you were ramming your monsters into. So it's kind of like a bit of a suicide bombing strategy. Yeah, that sounds rather morbid. Oh man. But yeah, you could kind of do that too, but I haven't really tested that yet. But this is something I actually thought about, and it's a kind of a cool play. And I think this is kind of a way to deal with certain matchups too, but it's not ideal because your opponent can't stop you with like Mirror Force or Dimensional Prism, because that is a thing that can happen. Although if you're smart, you wouldn't attack with this first anyways. So that's just my thoughts on that. And yeah, I think that's everything now. Like, geez, man. It's been a while since I've done this, but you know what? It's a long video, but again, I have the deck list in the description, so if you don't want to hear me do all this talking for almost an hour, holy crap, This is probably my longest video ever. Like, holy crap, guys. Man, no wonder I'm never uploading videos. Like, a lot of the videos I upload are freaking long because I tend to talk about a lot of things, especially in my deck profiles where I go in depth about everything and go off tangent about everything. I suppose for some of you guys, you wouldn't have it any other way, right? Or maybe you would. Or maybe you would prefer it another way. I can't read your mind, but yeah, I'm back. And boy, this was a mouthful to do. Like, you have no idea how hard it was to try to keep my mind going, especially because I haven't done this in a while. So I think this turned out pretty well. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. I mean, Yu-Gi-Oh is going in a very interesting direction. And I know some people, some particular people I watch are seemingly gonna quit the game soon or whatever, but you know, like if they do, and you know, I do hope, you know, best of luck at whatever they do next and stuff like that, because I know when SS Jason 19, I know when he like quit a while ago, and he recently uploaded a video again, and you know, I was like, oh my god, awesome, man. You know, he asked me why I haven't uploaded. Well, life and Yu-Gi-Oh is kind of in an interesting spot where I seem to have more fun getting into the discussions and the video comments as opposed to actually uploading videos as actual video stuff, you know? It's kind of weird. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about this whole ordeal. Like, what do you think about Yu-Gi-Oh right now? Is it still enjoyable for you? I mean, I think it is, mostly because I'm playing a deck like this, where I can adapt it based on cards that come out for it, like Twin Twister. I mean, this is a card that really helps. It indirectly helps many decks, even the rogue decks, and not just the tier 1 decks. But unfortunately, I fear that because of a card like this, it's going to get the same treatment one day where it's going to get limited or something like that. But, you know, I mean, it is what it is, I guess. I mean, that is Yu-Gi-Oh sometimes, like, especially when you get into the whole advanced play, you know, cards like Mathematician, which are flexible in even tier 2 decks, but because the tier 1 decks can abuse it so hard, it does have to get limited. So, you know, it is what it is, I guess. But yeah, let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you guys next time, I guess. See you guys later. Peace.